Good morning, everyone. Good morning, America. Good morning, people outside of America. Are there people outside of America? If you're American, you don't really know that. Anyway,
well, if there are, we put a heavy duty tariff on them.
and that tariff will be imposed today. Apparently, today is Saturday, February 1st, 2025. I'm editorial cartoonist Ted Rall, coming to you from the left.
And coming to you from the right, I'm editorial cartoonist Scott Stantis, coming off the longest January in the history of our species. God, it seems like this guy has been president for 17 years.
That's true.
It's been less than 2 weeks.
It is kind of amazing. No, it's true. I mean, you said this to me a couple of days ago. You just sort of offhandedly said, it feels he's only been in office for just over a week. And it feels like Trump's been president for the last 5 years. Yeah,
it's. I mean, and I think that's the point. That's his MO, right? He's going to just, just throw stuff out, misdirect, and obfuscate, and some stuff sticks, some stuff doesn't. That's the world we live in today.
Yeah, my impression was that in his first term, and even just throughout his pre-political career as a business person and entertainer, that this was kind of something, a tactic that he blundered into. It's just his personality to be sort of naturally, he has cocaine in the veins, if not necessarily in his nose. And he's a spaz. He just goes on and he floods the zone. Steve Miller took note of that, his advisor, and it's been reported that he planned this time for the second term that this was going to be a feature of this administration, where there was going to be so much new policy and legislation and statement making and moves afoot that would be impossible for the media which is stretched thin anyway, or for the Democrats to respond in any kind of quickly. By the time they start to figure out a response to something, Trump's on to the next thing 10 minutes later. So it's impossible to keep up. It's like trying to drink from a fire hose. And it's definitely intentional. And it's a pretty smart move.
Can you do this for 4 years, though? I mean, seriously. I mean, look what's happened over the last 10 days. I mean, it's insane. And we're going to dive into it because maybe Ted has an explanation. I've asked a lot of people why we're putting a tariff on Canada, and no one can answer the question. But generally speaking, this whole Adderall-driven ADD world of politics, is this sustainable for 4 years, Ted? I can't.
The answer to your question. It's not. And the reason it's not, it's because there just isn't that much stuff that he can do without Congress, and there's not that much stuff Congress can do completely with just barely one party rule. Let's not forget, right? The Republican control of the Senate. They don't have that magic 60 vote supermajority that gives you the rubber stamp Congress. So they can't there's some things they can't do without Democrats, like, past federal budgets, for example. So there's all sorts of things Democrats can start to do. They can take a page from the Republicans as obstructionists. They can threaten to not raise the debt limit. That's been brought up in reporting, something Democrats are thinking about doing. They can block budgets. There's all sorts of stuff they can do. I don't know if they will, but the point is there's not that much radical change that he can make by himself. At a certain point, you're just out of material.
Yeah, I would imagine that. I just have to believe that has to happen at some point. This is so exhausting. My wife had a great line the first Trump term, and she said, I think 2 years into it, she said, I just want to go a day without thinking about him. I mean, you went days without thinking about Obama. You went days without thinking about Clinton. You went days without thinking about Bush. I mean, I want to go days without thinking about the president. And this guy, is his narcissistic need ever satiated? Ever? I can't imagine it. Clearly, it's not ever.
It appears to be a bottomless pit. Look, I don't think, to answer your question again, I don't think that he intends to or wants to do this for 4 years. I don't think that's the point. I think that these Trump and his team have been studying history, and recent history in particular, and they realized that there's really at most a year, really we're talking 6 months to 9 months, to jam through as much stuff as he can before his political capital starts to run out, before moderate members of the Republican Party who are facing midterm reelection campaigns next year, governors included, some senators, that they're turning to their reelection bids, before, he just can't get all this stuff done. So it's got to happen now. And this is something that I had advised, when Obama became president. I was like, when there was dithering going on, I was like, you don't have time to dither. You will never have political capital like you have now. You got to go gangbusters. Obviously, we know what happened. He didn't. But they've learned from that. They are doing just that. I mean, every Democrat I've talked to, I've asked, aren't you jealous? And they're like, yeah, they're all jealous. Can you imagine, a progressive liberal Democrat, with this degree of ADHD, tsunami, flood the zone, avalanche of left of center legislation and policy? I mean, we'd all be it would be orgasmic. But, we haven't seen anything like that, I would say, for sure, since LBJ, but really you have to go to FDR.
I think, LBJ had the advantage of, and this sounds horrible, but coming off of the death of JFK, you could cloak all of this legislation because it was starting to be formulated under the Kennedy administration and say, this is for Jack, and so you push that through. And he did. He pushed through monumental legislation and did it and was proud of it because he was a Southerner as well. But truly, if you think the lesson learned, Ted, this has got to hurt so much and make your teeth itch, that the lesson that this administration is taking from more than any other moment in history is from FDR, the first 100 days of the Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the height of progressivism, the height of democratic rule, and the one person who takes away and looks back and go, oh yeah, that worked pretty damn well, is Donald fucking Trump. I mean, it could have been Obama. It should have been Obama. It should have been Clinton. It wasn't either of those guys. It was Donald Trump. So, now we're going to go forward. I mean, I guess the other question is, are we doomed? I mean, I'm going to put it as bluntly as I possibly can.
Be more specific, please. Because there's many ways to be doomed. Many ways.
A friend of mine just got, I'm not sure, he was just made a part of the Supreme Court bar, which is really awesome.
Very clearly, for sure,
clearly a smart guy. So I asked him, do you think this is the end of American democracy? Is this the end of, or at least democracy in America as we grew to know it? And he was very optimistic about the future, saying that the institutions are strong. All of this, it's going to be 2 or 3 years of bullshittery that we're going to have to muddle through, but that the courts, this Constitution, and the laws and provisions in place thereof are strong and will provide us ample protections from this tomfoolery. Dude, I'm not convinced. And I told him that. I said, I'm just not convinced that that's the case. Do you think it is, Ted?
I would have said something similar, and I think this. I think I did 3 months ago, privately, we talked about this. And now I'm not so convinced either. A friend of mine sent me a terrifying article yesterday in Politico, which basically talks about scenarios under which, is it the 22nd Amendment that's the term limit?
Yes.
So that under which Trump could bypass the 22nd Amendment limit, a 2-term limit on presidential terms. And, so basically it sort of went into how it could be done. I mean, you could just simply ignore it and then hope that the Supreme Court enforces it, but the Supreme Court might not enforce it because they're so friendly to Trump. You could declare a national emergency. There's the most terrifying, and this reminded me of a page kind of from the Putin playbook. When Putin was term limited out after 2 terms under the Russian Constitution, so he bowed out and had his ass boy Medvedev basically do the presidency for him. Now, Medvedev, in some respects, was his own man, but not very much. And I mean, a little bit. Not. I mean, he annoyed Putin sometimes, but the point is, Then he used those 4 years to get the parliament in Russia to change that and amend the constitution so he could return and run for a third term. Well, the thing is, there is a J.D. Vance option here, which is you run J.D. Vance as the nominee. He promises to resign on day one. There's nothing that prohibits Trump from running as J.D. Vance's vice presidential candidate, and J.D. Vance promises to resign, and then maybe Trump appoints J.D. Vance as his vice president, right? So if that's his promise, that's completely constitutional. I mean, it's completely chicanery, obviously, it's strictly speaking constitutionally legal. And you might say, like, well, why would he do all this shit? He's going to be 82 years old. Well, because he's still, when he leaves office, he's highly incented to stay in office, because when he leaves office, he's still got some legal drama possibly waiting for him. Jack Smith, when he moved to suspend the current prosecutions against him, like for J6 and so on, and the classified records case, he specifically said, we reserve the right to resume this as soon as the president leaves office. So if you're Donald Trump, you're thinking, well, I can pull this chicanery, or I can go to prison. So what are you going to do if you're Donald Trump? So that terrifies me. We violated the rule of Sun Tzu and Machiavelli, right? The Democrats cornered their adversary and they did not allow him a graceful exit. Now, like a cornered rat, not only is he biting, he's now in office. He's the boss. He runs everything. He's got the Supreme Court. He's got most of the state houses. We don't ever talk about that. He's got the House. He's got the Senate. He's got the media. He's got big tech. Big tech is sucking his cock like nobody's business. I mean, Facebook just basically paid him a $25 million bribe. CNN is about to pay him like about $10 million. CBS, right. Sorry, thank you for that correction. CBS is about to pay him $10 million. They never would have done that if he was not the president. They would have been like, this is effectively a bribe. Because the parent company of CBS, Paramount, wants to merge, has some major merger coming up, and they want the Trump administration to sign off on it. So what better way than to hand him a big check on a foam core, an oversized check, like he won the fucking lottery. Yeah, well, don't forget the balloons. So it's I do think the system is being stress tested like no time since maybe World War II or 9/11 or something like that. I mean, this guy is what's truly terrifying isn't the fact that he's a colossal deranged asshole. What's terrifying is that the Democrats don't really care. Yesterday, The Guardian reprinted one of my cartoons, which was basically Biden, and he's like meeting with Hitler, except, in front of the White House, the Oval Office fireplace. And he's like, unlike you fascists, Biden says, we're going to have a peaceful transfer of power to you fascists. And that's what's going on here. It's like the Democrats think that they can pat themselves on the back because they basically did the right thing here. Doing the right thing here is the wrong thing. Well, what do you mean? Well, I'm just saying that like they should be absolutely obstructionist. They need to go back to 2010 and 2014 and look at the stuff that Mitch McConnell said back then. Like, we will do absolutely nothing to cooperate with Barack Obama. We will block him at every turn. We will not let him. We will make sure if he's a one-term president, okay, that didn't work. We're going to make sure his presidency is a failure. That kind of did work. And it's like, so we're going to cock block him at every turn. Democrats aren't doing that. They're like, we're looking. Amy Klobuchar is in the New York Times today talking about like how, Democrats are really looking for places to cooperate with the new administration. That's what the people are in the mood for. I'm like, no, it's not. Republicans are not in the mood to cooperate. They're like, we won, we get everything we want. And liberal Democrats, trust me, I know all my friends except for you are liberal Democrats. And like, they all say, they're like, basically, fuck those people, fuck them. If we ever get a shot, we're putting our shit back in. But otherwise, we're done with politics. We're not even watching this shit. I mean, that's where they're at. So no, nobody's in the mood for compromise. This is stuff that Obama said. Everyone wants to just like get along. No, they don't. Like Americans are not in that mood right now.
Oh, I agree. I think the Republicans definitely aren't in that mood. They feel they're large and in charge, even though it's only by two votes, which is stunning. That you think that's a mandate somehow, but they do. And I listen. If I was in that position, I'd run with it too. I'd say, yeah, because they are in charge. They do run the House. They run the Senate. They have the White House. But going forward, I mean, is the population of this great country, are they happy? Are they surprised? I mean, here's the thing. Nobody has the right to be surprised that this shit's happening. Please back me up on this, Ted, because if you have the temerity to sit there and say, who saw this coming?
Everybody.
Fuck you.
Well, that's hilarious. I mean, you know who's saying that is the Democratic Party.
What the hell's wrong with them?
You know what they're up to this weekend, right? The DNC, in other words,
in Minnesota,
AKA, the stupidest people in America are meeting, and that's saying a lot because this is America.
That's a high bar,
man. We're famously stupid, maybe not quite as stupid as Aussies, but we're stupid. And like the point is, the DNC is meeting, and like according to the New York Times, there's no sense that the Democrats feel that they did anything wrong or that they screwed up in this election or that, I mean, hell, they literally are taking advice points at the DNC meeting from Kamala Harris, talking about how much they appreciate her continued leadership. Kamala Harris shouldn't be able to get her calls returned by the Democratic Party at this point. I mean, it's madness. And the point is that they're all saying, well, no one could have seen what would happen with Joe Biden. Everybody saw what was happening with Joe Biden.
Nobody admitted it. And those of us who pointed it out consistently for the 4 years of his term were regularly shouted down and demeaned by the very people who are now saying,
no.
What? Why? Oh God, who saw this coming? Who?
And also, we never talk about this because, it's just a side thing, but who could have seen that Kamala Harris would not be a great choice as vice president, right? Because, I mean, when you're dealing with it, when your president is 5 zillion years old, maybe the choice of the vice presidency is super important, right? So, because that person may well end up being your candidate, in 4 years. And that's what happened, right? So, like, they didn't think that through either. Again, who could have seen that? A lot of people saw it. I mean, and I don't mean just like people like you and me. I mean, very serious people like James Carville, who should be able to get his phone calls returned from the DNC, but apparently can't. And he's been yelling. I mean, the problem with the Democratic Party is they're a hidebound institution that has no mechanism for internalizing information that goes contrary to their dominant narrative. They can't hear anything that they don't want to hear. And when you have that kind of organization, you are fucked because you will not get the information you need to pivot when you make a mistake, which you inevitably will.
And we've had people on this podcast who have said that Kamala Harris was the best possible candidate and ran a perfect campaign.
Mm-hmm. Yep, we sure have.
I mean, it just makes my brain hurt. And so I'm watching the goings on in Minneapolis or St. Paul, whichever place they are in Minnesota, and scratching my head thinking they're talking as if they're in the catbird seat. They're like, oh, we're in a great position. And you're going, okay, let me ask you this. Okay,
they've got the Republicans just where they want them, in charge of everything.
Let me ask our listeners
into our plan.
Let me ask our viewers this. Who is the leader of the Democratic Party today?
Oh, that's such a sad question. Well, according to today's New York Times.
Okay, go ahead. What is the New York Times?
Kamala Harris. They literally are saying that Kamala Harris. I'm not even kidding. Don't believe me. You shouldn't believe me. It's ridiculous. Go look it up in today's New York Times about the DNC.
How do they get there from here? That's like saying James Cox was head of the Democratic Party in 1921. I mean, it's insanity. It's like, really, he just got his ass kicked by a guy who everybody unanimously believed was a dunderhead in Warren G. Harding. Although I don't think he was, quite frankly, but he pretty
No,
much.
he
You know,
wasn't.
but
He was just
that
really old.
well, it wasn't that. He was also busy with a couple of mistresses.
Yeah, he was
and
balls
out of
deep
wedlock
a lot.
children. Yeah, he really was. He was a busy boy, and but also he was affable. He looked presidential, which is hilarious. But I mean, and James Cox, the governor of Ohio, ran with a little-known fella from New York named Franklin Delano Roosevelt as his running mate, and they got their asses kicked. In 1921, was anyone saying James Cox is the head of the Democratic Party?
I don't know, and
I
can
would
look this
doubt
up,
it.
but
I would
be
bet
very
you a lot of
surprised.
money.
Although the Democrats were out of power for the next 12 years, right? I mean, they ended up, so it didn't.
Yeah, well,
didn't
that
go
was
so
on
well
top
for
of.
them.
Yeah, because that was that chain, the only broken up only by 2 terms of Woodrow Wilson and Edith Wilson at the
Yeah,
end.
true.
But I think from the end of the Civil War, you had Cleveland twice, you had Woodrow Wilson twice, and that's pretty much it until FDR.
Well, I mean, do you count Coolidge? Because Coolidge, basically had
Republican. No, I'm saying they're all Republican.
He had about but he had about 7 years in office, right?
Yeah. Well, he succeeded to the office after the death of Harding, and then ran for in his own right in 1924, and then 1928 stepped down, and Herbert Hoover was elected, and then whoopsies.
And then we'll see and what the Democrats pulled off between that massive defeat with vice presidential running mate, FDR, and presidential candidate FDR in 1932 was a massive realignment, especially on domestic policy. I mean, that's what changed. I mean, literally the parties almost switched places there. I mean, the FDR reinvented the Democratic Party for a new set of circumstances. And that became, I mean, even today, the legacy of FDR, I would say FDR is really the founder of the modern Democratic Party.
Far. I mean, you get doing things like, don't forget, I mean, jaws will drop, but the Republican Party, a large majority of the African-American population voted Republican.
Oh, yeah.
Prior to FDR.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
W.C. Handy, the founder of the blues in Memphis, Tennessee, wrote Dwight David Eisenhower's marching song. Did you know that?
No, I did not.
Yeah, 1952.
Wait, when do you think there's those corny, we've talked about those corny marching campaign songs. By the way, I bet there are people who collect them all. I've seen the sheet music on eBay.
Okay, Ted, full disclosure. Let me interrupt you real quick.
You have
full disclosure. About 2 days ago, I was just kind of looking around at historic lectures and stuff, and came across there's a YouTube channel that has them.
Oh, wow.
So you can listen to them.
Oh my God, I'm going to listen to them. So when do you think? So Eisenhower had one. So
yes, W.C. Handy wrote it.
Have one? Like, who's the last?
He had a jingle on TV.
Had, like,
remember Kennedy. Was that animated?
Oh yeah, that's right.
So
the animation is actually kind of awesome.
Yeah, and I think they had jingles, but I'm trying to think.
How about Johnson?
I don't think Johnson did, but if you remember, Reagan. No, I'm sorry, Jerry Ford. 1976, I'm feeling good about America.
Really?
It was like a marching band kind of thing. And yes, he had. Yeah.
Okay, then. Wow.
Yeah. I worked on the Ford campaign back then. And that was, yeah.
Well, I mean, you guys came close. I mean, it was a tight campaign.
Yeah, and I think I do wonder if Ford had won, what direction the country would have taken then if we would have gone down the same route as Jimmy Carter. You would not have had the Malay speech.
How different would it have been? Do you think, really?
Well, I guess.
All right. So it was 1977. President Ford, not really reelected, but elected in his own right. As you very well said. What would he have confronted? Well, his first problem was inflation, because that raged throughout that entire late 70s.
He had the button.
Whip
inflation now.
He would have had to have dealt with that. He would have had to deal with the church committee hearings about the CIA, wrongdoings in Latin America. He would have had to deal with he would have had to decide what to do. Should he have accepted the Shah for medical treatment to the United States?
I think
something that Carter did reluctantly, and it turned out wrongly.
I think what you would have had too is with
and what to do about Afghanistan, the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan.
I think he would have gone down. It's just the American instinct is to go, let's give money to people who are fighting our enemy. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, which is not true. Just.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Ford never really faced a serious foreign policy crisis.
Yes, he did, and that's why I think
the Mayaguez incident,
which was a ship. It was I'm trying. Golly,
hold on. That's not a very major thing, though.
Well, it was a ship an American ship. It was flew under the American flag, and it was taken off the coast of Cambodia, which I didn't know Cambodia had a coast, but apparently there it is.
Oh no, I've been there. It does.
I'm sure. Well, it did because they took our ship, and
this was the Khmer Rouge government.
Yeah. Well, yeah. After the revolution, I assume it was Khmer Rouge, and they captured and tortured the crew of that ship. Ford sent in, a SWAT team to extract them. Did so. I think he got all of them out, all of the crew out safely. If I'm not mistaken.
Right. Yeah, I think it worked.
And so I suspect, given what he did with the Mayaguez, if the same situation had occurred in Iran, I think we know he would have sent in very short order would have sent American troops in to extract them. Now, would that have had the same result? Who knows? But because that's what
Carter tried to do too.
Well, the Iranians also learned from the Mayaguez that you disperse your hostages. You don't keep them all in one place, and that's what the Cambodians kept them in a warehouse near the ship. So we got the ship and the guys.
Well, the camp. I mean, also, I think I would not if I were President Rall in 1975. I would not be shaking in my shoes about the Khmer Rouge regime compared, up against the U.S. military. I would have been like, yeah, send them in, fuck them. But yeah, I mean,
well,
so I don't.
True of Iran, you had a bunch of students. I mean, you start shooting.
I don't think those presidencies would have looked very different, I guess is my point.
Okay, now now you're making me dredge my speaking points when I was on the Ford Speakers Bureau. But the economy was starting to recover and was not spiraling into the stagflation that it eventually did. Now, part of that was because of the energy crisis, right? The 1978-79 embargo by OPEC, which had a massive impact, for obvious reasons. I mean, when you have your source of energy restricted, your economy is going to get into trouble. I'm not sure. Were you old enough to drive then?
No. My mother drove, and I remember gas rationing.
Do you remember staying in line? Did you guys have to stay in line to get gas?
No, because we had ration coupons, and we also had odd even license plates.
Well, so did we, but you still had to get in line for that stuff. But back in I was in California.
My mom drove a Renault, which had to be refilled like every 17 years. So it got like amazing gas mileage. So I remember it was like one of those things like, well, it sucks to be my neighbor who drives the Cadillac Coupe de Ville, but with push button transmission, but we're okay. We're fine.
All right. So yeah, I mean, it's always fascinating to me. We were talking before we went on what it would be like to, live under and who was president during the time, like Ted and I were just talking about who was president when we were born. And I was born under, Dwight Eisenhower. And you were born under Kennedy.
Yes.
And then he shot himself. What does that tell
you? Yeah. Wait, shot himself.
Did you see? I have to admit, The Daily Show did a great joke, and it's right up our alley, Ted. They were talking about they're covering the hearings with RFK Jr. And RFK Jr. They said, he said, I'm not against vaccines. I'm not against vaccines. And then they had him on a podcast where he says, I wish I could go back in time. If I could go back in time and do anything, it would make sure my kids weren't vaccinated. And the host goes, really? If you could go back at any time, that's the one Kennedy getting shot that you'd worry about?
That's awesome. That is funny.
Which is true. I mean, it's like, how fucking stupid are you? Now, okay, you and I really haven't commented on some of these guys like what's his name? Hegseth, yes. the new Secretary of Defense. I mean, did you see him on the weekend shows after he got confirmed?
No,
he's a fucking nut. He's yelling like this, like he's still on the show and what they want us to do, and they want to destroy America, and I'm going to make sure that America stays sovereign. It's like, oh my God.
Well, don't forget Donald Trump. Donald Rumsfeld was a lunatic also, albeit of a different stripe. Just want to be clear here.
Right, but this is unqualified too. This is a guy who rose to
Well,
way to the rank of major.
Donald Rumsfeld was certainly qualified.
Yeah, but to your point, he made massive mistakes, and
he was a lunatic. I mean, the way he talked, he was like the whole like there are known knowns and unknown unknowns, and then like my personal favorite WMD comment: we know where the WMDs are. They are north, east, south, and west somewhere, somewhat of Baghdad. So they're somewhere on Earth.
Maybe.
Perhaps. In fact, they weren't, but okay.
No. Well, okay, there's that. That's the one thing I do like. It's one of the very few positive things I can say about this president is that his anti-war stances. We're talking about the history. We're talking about, for instance, in 1952, had I been of voting age and involved in either politics or commented on them as an editorial cartoonist back then, would I have supported Eisenhower or Taft at the National Republican Convention? I am, and I've mentioned this before.
And you should explain like what was the difference between them.
The difference was Taft was a dyed-in-the-wool conservative Republican and was a non-interventionist. Was
he President Taft's son?
He was. He was the governor of Ohio, Robert Taft Jr., and he was the front runner. And this would really piss you off if you were him, I have to admit. He comes into the convention as the front runner. He's won they only had like 5 primaries back then, but all the other things he was winning.
Yeah, the Republican Party more like advisory, right? Kind of like it was almost like a straw poll.
I think there were 1 or 2 that were binding, but you're right. Mostly it was like, who do you like? And Eisenhower comes out in 51, late 51, says, yeah, okay, I'm a Republican. And the Republican Party loses its
people
mind.
Who remember Colin Powell waffling with his political ambitions about like whether he was a Democrat or Republican. He wasn't the first general to do that, right? It was Eisenhower who did that. And so Eisenhower at the time was president of Columbia University.
Yeah. God, isn't that weird? Think about that. Yeah. Your alma mater.
Yeah, no, I used to walk by so most presidents of Columbia University never used the president's house. They tended to be rich people who had like beautiful townhouses of their own on the east side. But Eisenhower lived there, and it has a view, a commanding view of the city. It's up on top of a cliff, which is Morningside Park, and you can see all the way to Queens and the Bronx. You can you can read the billboards in the Bronx. It's far. You can see all the planes arrive at LaGuardia. It's a beautiful, stunning view. And Eisenhower liked to paint, and he would sit in the bay window at the president's house at Columbia and paint views out of the window out of there.
Can you imagine?
I think it's kind of cool.
And what's weird is if you, I think it was Mamie Eisenhower, and I could be getting this story completely wrong, but I think I'm right. When she said they did not own their own home until after they left the White House, because they had army housing, obviously up until he left, and I think it was.
He probably wasn't rich, right? I mean,
no. Although generals do pretty well, but he still had army housing, and generals' houses are nice and they're well maintained by people you don't have to pay.
Like slavery.
Yeah, pretty much. And then he gets into the White House. I mean, he gets to Columbia, he gets the president's house there, gets to the White House, gets a house there for 8 years, and then he leaves and he finally bought a home. I think he lived in near West Point, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, so who would I have supported back then? And this is a long way to get to a short point. Donald Trump's anti-intervention, America First policies internationally, I totally agree with. I hate that we have extended ourselves. We got ourselves involved in 2 stupid friggin' wars. That's recent history. How many other stupid wars did we get involved with over the years because we decided we should? I mean, it's just dumb.
And those are the ones that we think about. I mean, the United States, you and I have talked about this, has, every now and then you're like, oh, so we lost a soldier in Chad. And you're like, we're in Chad? When are we in Chad? What are we doing in Chad? How did we lose a soldier in Chad? It's not like the dude was like on safari. I mean, what happened to him? And then it's like, oh, he was fighting Al-Shabaab. And we're like, who's Al-Shabaab? And then like we've been fighting a lot. We've been fighting a big war in Syria, a proxy war against Russia and Assad in Syria for years. And how many Americans know that, right? Like we've had U.S. troops in danger and getting killed in Syria.
No, it was like, what wasn't it? Niger?
Yeah, Niger.
Niger, where we had an American soldier was killed by a terrorist act of some kind.
Yeah.
And you're going, wait, we're there? Why?
How come no one told us? I mean, aren't we paying for this
shit? And why? I mean,
what for?
Is that a vital national interest?
Yeah, and they always say that, like protecting vital, security interests of the United States, which literally are words, but they don't mean anything.
They are words. There's no doubt about it, them being words. Real quick on the side note, because you are intimately interested in the, Southeast, in Asia, but also in the Middle East. Can you get us an update on Syria? That story, sure. Assad leaves and then what?
Well, so Assad is, I guess, chilling in Russia right now. He fled into exile. Russia was his patron. So the Russians took him in, and that's it for him. There's rumors that his hot wife is going to leave him, but that's that. He's obviously not coming back. This guy who was the head of a jihadi Al-Qaeda organization called HTS came to power. It has promised that he is only leading a transitional government that will hold free and fair elections within the next 3 to 4 years. He claims that there's going to be a pluralistic society. Part of the problem with that announcement about like the pluralistic society was that when he announced it, not only were there no ethnic minorities represented at the podium. In fact, I mean, Syria's got tons of ethnic minorities. I mean, it's an extremely diverse country. It's got a lot of Christians. It's got a lot of Muslims. It's got Jewish people. It's got lots of people, and none of them were there. There weren't even any chicks there. It was all dudes. So the problem is this is a Salafist jihadi guy, and I guess what we're being asked to believe is that he can modernize, put down arms, and pivot to become like a Western style democracy within 3 to 4 years, and that he intends to, A, and B, that he can. And I think, the smart money is probably not on either of these being true. He seems to be a smart guy, but I'd be like, there's already some signs, like he wears military fatigues as president. He sort of looks like Fidel Castro, as opposed to, a business suit. That kind of thing is, these are symbolism matters in politics,
right? And
especially in a revolution. This is a kind of a revolution, sort of. I mean, it's a faction in a civil war coming to power. The truth is, he's a warlord, and he's come to power, and we'll see what happens. Warlords usually don't pivot to democracy. There have been some exceptions, but we'll see if he's one of them. The U.S. is sucking up to him, and so are the European allies. They want to be involved in Syria. There's money to be made, and perhaps the most perverse and strange aspect of all this is that the U.S., Israel, and Western Europe worked so hard to destabilize, basically a secular socialist dictatorship under Assad, and turn Syria into a jihadi Taliban-style state right on the border with Israel. And I have to say, if I cared about Israel, I would just be like, what the fuck? What's with this?
Yeah, well, we've done, I'm trying to think if we've done this before, and indeed we have, and we'll probably do it again. It makes no sense. That's why, like I said, getting back to my initial point, Trump's idea of just, not being the world's policeman, not getting involved in internal politics of other nations, unless it's trade, apparently, really is, commendable. And I think it kind of resets the stage, doesn't it? That's saying that, excuse me, dang it. That tells the world, okay, you're on, do your thing, man. if you want us to participate in NATO, you really are going to have to give 2% of your GDP. That's the agreement you signed on for. If like the Assad regime, that's a perfect example. The same thing. I mean, you see pictures from 1980s Kabul, early 1980s Kabul, where there's women walking around in dresses in Western wear.
Late 70s. Yeah. But I take your point. Yeah.
Okay. And we fucked that up and we did the same. And so you're right. Syria is one of those, this guy comes in and he's saying all the right things for us. I am curious what he's telling the Arab street. I am curious to know what he's saying to the jihadists in Syria. And, ISIS was in Syria as well. Don't forget. And
they're still are.
Yeah. So what is he saying to them?
Well, I mean, Al-Qaeda and ISIS are rivals, right? They're not buds. But Al-Qaeda ISIS managed to really radicalize the situation to the point that remember, ISIS's whole brief was Al-Qaeda are pussies. They don't take jihadism far enough. We're the real deal. And so that forced Al-Qaeda to become even more radical in order to try to keep up. So that's the effect. I mean, we are talking about people who are now running Syria have decapitated prisoners on video. So these are not really the nicest people. But I mean, people can and do change. I don't
really.
Yeah, probably not. Most likely not. But sometimes they do. I'm trying to think of an example. It doesn't happen that often. But so I mean, look, to get back to this has been, I think I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, Scott, about the 30,000 migrants who are about to be sent to Guantánamo Bay concentration camp. They are going to be, the executive order is going to be issued this week, ordering Gitmo to open up. I guess the argument in favor of it is that there, in the past, like during the Mariel boat lift and at other times, there have been, Guantanamo has been used as a transit point. But here's the thing that was chilling to me. In the case of, he said, well, these are the worst of the worst, Trump said. And in many cases, the home countries that these people are citizens of, places like Honduras and Guatemala, etc., El Salvador, they are willing to take their nationals back.
Oh, I bet.
And well, I don't know why they would be willing, but they are. And,
well, that's a lot of people to teach a lesson using them as the tool.
Okay, but he has told, but he says, I don't trust the Guatemalans or whatever to keep these bad hombres, and so they might come back. So in order to make sure they don't come back, we're going to keep them detained indefinitely at Guantanamo. And of course, Guantanamo has, rightly so, an atrocious reputation as a torture and death camp. So, and I call it a death camp because they've driven so many of the Muslim detainees to suicide. They've also murdered some on premises. Mostly it's about waterboarding and other forms of torture. I mean, really charming ones like using a drill on people, stuff like that. So, that would be owie. I mean, this is, I think part of the idea here is let's scare the shit out of illegal migrants, and they're going to self-deport and say, I don't want to go to fucking Guantanamo. I'll go back to Honduras. Fuck it.
I think that's part of it. Now, here some quick back history of where they're sending them and why. Although not the why as much as where they're going to. Guantanamo has a fairly sizable plot dedicated to handling immigrants. It was designed specifically or primarily for Haitian immigrants coming up from the Caribbean. And but how long ago was that? That's how old the barracks are where they held these guys. I have to believe that the barracks weren't great when they were new, and now that these are going
to be new barracks, according to, and it's also going to be expensive to house.
Well, I was going to ask that. How much money is this going to cost us?
Well, we know that the approximate cost of shipping one migrant to Guantanamo Bay, just shipping them there, is $5,000. It'd be cheaper to fly them first class because they go on a military transport. Military planes are expensive. And then there's the annual cost. I mean, the annual cost of housing a Guantanamo torture detainee is about $1.2 million for one. So, it's not like,
again, why is that? Why that seems extremely expensive.
I think the price will probably drop. It'll probably per capita drop when they have more of them. There's going to be economies of scale, right? Like more, one guard will be responsible for more than their current number of victims. But there's going to be still, it's expensive. It's even more expensive than housing an inmate in state or federal prison in the United States, which is also not cheap. But
there's also rumors that they're going to, contract this out to for-profit prison outfits.
Well, that would be a different thing. That wouldn't be at Guantanamo. That would be in addition.
Why not?
Because that's a military installation.
Yeah, but they have a lot of contracted work out now. If you've been on, a friend of ours' son is in the Army.
Yeah, but not brigs and stuff like that.
Okay.
They could change it.
Oh yeah,
of course.
Well,
yeah.
Of course, because the friends of Trump's make money, and hence, So, you have these.
As to quote my dead mom, no one would care if this. When
no. That's
no one will care.
No one. Because first of all, it's also a smart move, Ted, in that notion, isn't it? Because out of sight, out of mind. Guantanamo, you can't have the press there. You can't. The prisoners are going to have their phones, or if they have phones at all, are going to have those confiscated and they're going to have to go through military servers. Mm-hmm. So we're not going to see any scenes from these places.
No, and the press isn't there.
Yeah,
it's hard to get access. It's expensive for the media, and the media is broke. And the coverage that the media's already had a hard time covering the terrorism, sort of drumbeat tribunals, the kangaroo courts that they've had down there. So they've, they have, and journalists have complained, like, well, they don't show us anything, so
right.
What's the point of going? They don't let you see anything.
So 30,000 people being housed by the U.S. government.
Up to 36,000. Now, if they convert a golf course, is according to, of course, if I were Trump, I'd be like, don't convert the golf course.
Yeah, you can't do that. What's he going to do when he flies down the weekends to torture?
Yeah.
He'll show up there.
Like this is going to be good times for Ron DeSantis. He can be able to get back to the old waterboarding days from when he was at Guantanamo.
Oh yeah. Well,
he'll be right there. It's going to be like this is his vacation now. People have been wondering what he was going to do after he got term limited out. Here he goes.
And he still wants to be president. By the way, he's still making a lot of noise for 28. He really does. And it's just like,
well, you're the resident Republican here. How much of a chance does he have?
Zero. He, look at how he did when he ran in 24. He just,
it was poor.
My favorite moment of that whole campaign, of almost any campaign, was the Ron DeSantis charm offensive.
I just couldn't believe remember when he launched on X Spaces and apparently they couldn't get the feed up. Look, we all know what tech issues can do, but it was like, that sucks. Scott?
Oh, no, I'm just looking at some comments here from Eric Ankle, who said the biggest threat comes from the Heritage Foundation and the influence over the Republicans. Eric, write back and tell us what you mean by that. I'd be curious to know.
Oh. By the way, if you have a question for either Scott or myself or both of us, please pop it into the live feed. We're live right now on Rumble and YouTube. So just, pop that in and we will read it. And if we don't think it sucks, we'll read it. We'll answer it.
Thank you. And if afterwards you can comment, you can DM us through the usual channels, either Facebook or
we're on
X or Instagram or any of the other million things, which I don't know about because I'm old.
We're not on Instagram. Don't listen to Scott.
I'm on Instagram. Are you not on Instagram?
Well, yeah, I am on Instagram. I have to admit, I never look at it ever.
Really?
Ever. Yeah. I post my cartoons on there and that's it.
I post my cartoons there, but then I fall into the hole of the reels.
Yeah, I do that on Facebook. Apparently Facebook knows that I like animal videos and bad driving dash cam videos.
I used to wait a minute. You like cute puppy, or probably
no? I like more like rhinoceroses chasing people in buses. Alligators. Like I guess violent animals.
Okay, that's more on brand. I was curious.
No, not cute puppies. I mean, puppies be cute. I love puppies, sort of. Not really. Kittens. I actually prefer, I'm a weird person. I prefer adult cats to, people are like, oh, do the right thing. And, don't always adopt a kitten, like adopt an adult cat. And the thing is, so the advantage, the real reason I did that with Clovis is to get a kitten is you can train them, right? Like you get them used to things that, like, for example, having their paws touched so that you can trim their nails. So that's really a very solid reason to get a kitten. But in terms of liking their personalities, give me an old cat anytime. I mean, they're much more chill. Kittens are destructive. They're crazy and they're hard to keep up with. So,
well, same true of puppies.
Yeah, no, I could definitely see getting a senior dog as opposed to a puppy for sure.
Yeah, I was looking. I'm kind of at that age where we're thinking of getting a dog, and I really always wanted an English bulldog.
Yeah, but they have problems.
Oh, they have very profound problems. They have respiratory problems. That's why they sound like they sound. They, you have to clean the folds with a Q-tip. Oh yeah, I love them. I mean,
they're great.
Yeah, I
mean, they're great dogs, but I would have to say, if I were in the market for a dog, it would depend on where I lived and what it was for. But I do like boxers. They're really they're really great. They have an awesome personality. I like.
They don't bark much either.
Oh, well, with dogs, that's a really useful thing because the yippy dogs are annoying.
Oh my God. We have a neighbor here who has
I like dogs that look like wolves too, like sort of pointy, with big pointy ears, like huskies, although huskies are too much work for me because you have to have love and open heart and care. And that's just not me. Well, Scott, you and our agent has a husky. And that husky goes with him.
Oh, he does. Yeah. I had the first time I met him, we met for lunch in California, and he brought his dog. It was imagine my surprise.
Dog.
It's well behaved. I mean, it laid down, didn't beg for food or wasn't a pain in the ass. So
that's nice, proper husky care there. It is. But I like those what are those Jindos, like those Korean fighting dogs? Man, those are cool dogs. They're like,
I don't think I know that.
They basically look like a white wolf. They're gorgeous.
Ooh.
They're like
one of our neighbors here has a dog, and it's like one of these things that weighs, I'm not kidding, like 14 pounds.
Oh God. That's the weight of my cat.
No, I think I'd say Clovis weighs more than that.
Nah, he's not a fat ass. Don't
I didn't say he was fat. He's a big cat. He's big bone. And it yaps. And Ted, it bites. Oh. It bites them. And I'm going, you know what? If I had a dog that bit me, it would no longer be my dog.
No, I agree with you. It's like who are you? Fuck you.
I would let Yappy go out in the country where it can run free and be eaten by an owl. I'm sorry, that sounds horrible, but I'm a great believer in not being bitten by animals.
Well, that's how I feel about useless cats. Like the cats that like people have. Literally,
what's a useless cat?
A useless cat is a cat that performs no service. What does a cat have to do? Cat just basically has to be around. When you're stressed out, you can pet him or her, or they, if it's an intersex cat. Like you don't, like, that's all they have to do, right? They don't have to do anything else. They don't have to guard you. They don't have to be loyal to you. No one's expecting anything. The bar's low. But like, there are people who own cats where literally they don't see the cat. The cat comes out to eat and drink water and take a shit in the box. And then it goes like hides under the bed all day. That's all it does. It's a useless cat. And I'm like, if you don't even see your fucking cat like all day, except when it comes out to eat and shit, fuck that cat. That cat can go live with like the rabid dog that you have next door in the woods. Bye.
Yeah, I don't know that many cats have much utility. I mean, you and I
told you what the utility is. They just be present. Okay, they're like a city councilman. What does a city councilman have to do? Show up at the meeting, accept bribes in the bathroom after.
He's like a Republican congressman. Just agree with whatever Donald says. Right. Just show up. Curl up in his lap when he needs comforting.
Don't be like that Republican Congress lady from Texas who, remember the one who disappeared for 6 months. It turned out she was at the she was in the dementia memory care at the nursing home.
Well, she wasn't a Republican, or was she?
She was a Republican. It's always Republicans who have no work ethic, as you well know. Okay, I'm teasing.
That's amazing to think that you could. Yeah, well, but we had a
6
president.
months.
We had a president
Where's
for
Speaker
4
Johnson?
years.
Yeah, speaker. Like, what's the job of the Speaker of the House? Right, counting votes. He could forget about counting votes. He couldn't even He couldn't even take attendance. I mean, the lady's not around. I mean, I imagine like her constituents visiting Washington, right? Oh, let's pop in and see our Congresswoman. And it's like, yeah, she's not in right now. Oh, when's she gonna be in? Really?
She wandered that way about 2 weeks ago. She was heading towards the mall.
Or 4 months ago. I mean, how did they cover up for her all that time?
That's what staffs are for. I mean, but she couldn't have voted, so
nope.
That's interesting.
I mean, I feel sorry for her. It's horrible. What a way to. I mean,
you and
by
I
all
both,
accounts, she was a nice person and able congressperson until she lost her mind.
Yeah, and you and I both dealt with demented parents, and it's hard. So I wouldn't wish that on anyone, but it's still.
And
I also
really
did not
making
want
fun of her, although I am making fun of her. I'm really making fun of the Republicans' inability to keep track of their own members. Now I know there's like 212 of them or whatever, but still.
Well, I'm making fun of a system that allowed this to happen for so long.
Absurd.
I mean, come on.
Absurd.
It's absurd. Well, I think we covered everything we meant to cover. So we want to wrap it up.
All right, we will wrap it up. All right, so Scott, you know the deal here. The deal is that you're responsible for the singing part of the program, or the humming, or the chit chat, or whatever we're doing here. So
let me introduce the song. One of the best, a great documentary that came out in the 80s was on Elvis Presley, and it starts with, oh my gosh, I'm having a complete and utter mind fart right now with one of those like cheesy lounge type singers, like doing this weird hand gesture like this, and go ahead and start. And I'll sing the song he was singing. The announcer, the voiceover said before Elvis, and they showed this.
Okay, here we go.
So he's going, hot diggity, dog diggity, ooh, what you do to me. There was before Elvis. And it was, and then they go, they break into, a Jailhouse Rock, which is an amazing song. And Elvis was kind of amazing. So all that being said, bye everybody. Have a great day. And we'll talk to you next time.